Welcome to the Wrestling Source, the exclusive YouTube show of WrestlingNewsSource.com. My name's David, and I'll be here each week as we take a closer look at the current events in the world of professional wrestling. This week it's Viewer's Choice, and we take a look at superstars, old and new, titles, old and new, pay-per-views, old and new, all leading up to this week's WWE Raw special event, Old School. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? Let's get started. More great responses as usual to last week's video, especially in response to this week's request for the Viewer's Choice segment. Got them right here, and I'm going to refer to them as we talk about them. Talking about old superstars, user Zather15 asks for some updates about superstars from the Attitude Era. Many of them are exactly where you'd expect them to be. S.A. Rios is doing really well in Mexico. Tajiri's doing really well in Japan. A couple of oddballs, though. Mark Jindrak is actually doing really well in Japan as well, wrestling as Marco Corleone. Now, when you consider that Jindrak is a larger wrestler than we're used to seeing out of Japan in that lucha libre style, he's actually doing really well for himself in Mexico. And Sean Stasiak has left wrestling altogether and is currently a chiropractor. Went into the medical profession after leaving WWE in his last stint. So that's another sort of strange turn of events for a former wrestler. And with all wrestlers, just like the WWE, we at Wrestling News Source wish them all the best in their future endeavors. Some conversation around the WWE's business and how it can improve. We got many comments on that. User M1Kend wants to bring back the Cruiserweight and Hardcore titles. He thinks that having more titles will mix it up a little more and create more storylines and more competition. That could go either way, really. As we said last week, with the Intercontinental title and the great match that Dolph Ziggler and Daniel Bryan had at the Bragging Rights pay-per-view, I think we do need a secondary title to sort of elevate that second tier of wrestlers and bring them into the main event picture, competing more for that big title. But having too many titles in that picture could sort of muddy the waters and create a confusion among the different tiers of wrestlers, with too many wrestlers competing for too many titles, or not enough wrestlers competing for too many titles. It can create confusion and really sort of water down the product. So, yes, we do need some focus on the secondary titles, but let's not add too many of them. As for the Hardcore title, with WWE's current PG leanings, I don't see us ever getting back to the old rough and tumble hardcore events like we had with Mick Foley and some of the other great hardcore wrestlers. Which brings us to a question from VMAZ Evolution. Wants to know why TNA has seemingly thrown away its X Division title and its division. When you look at it, take a look at who's booking it now. It's Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan. And when Eric Bischoff tried to introduce a hardcore division into the WCW at the end of the 90s, it really tanked miserably. There was that awful, awful hardcore match that took place in a junkyard or something with really badly rigged effects and wrestlers that kind of didn't belong in the hardcore division. I think WCW's last hardcore champion was Norman Smiley. And when I think hardcore, I don't think Norman Smiley. I don't think Eric Bischoff really knows how to book that kind of excessive, extreme division. I think there was an attempt to sort of reboot it somewhat in TNA with the ECW originals coming back for their one-time event. But as far as an X division or a hardcore division overall, I don't know if it's going to happen again anytime soon, especially, like I said, with the WWE's current PG leanings. Another comment was on themed pay-per-views, with the potential of doing more themed pay-per-views and doing them fewer times a year. In fact, viewer Itchweed68 says the WWE could limit their pay-per-views down to 6 to 8 a year. In the current business marketplace and the current business temperature, with the WWE losing money the way they are, I think the last thing they can do is really limit the number of pay-per-views they have. I don't see them increasing them, thankfully, but I think they need to stick to their current model and just up the ante, so to speak, and make them more entertaining. And there was a comment from VMAZ Evolution again on bringing back themed pay-per-views like the Elimination Chamber and Hell in a Cell, using them to blow off the feuds once a month at pay-per-view events, instead of having just regular build-up to a Raw-like pay-per-view, as a means of upping the ante and increasing interest in pay-per-view events. And I think that could really be a way to go. Having a themed pay-per-view is something different, and it's something the fans don't see on a weekly basis, especially with WWE programming saturating the market right now with Superstars and SmackDown and Raw. We do see a lot of standard matches every week. Bringing back themed pay-per-views could be a way to go in increasing the interest in the pay-per-view market itself and increasing buy rates for overall pay-per-views. Guys, these were great questions. Thank you so much for submitting them to the Viewer's Choice column this week. But again, every week we do want to hear from you. So leave your comments here on the YouTube screen. You could also find us on Twitter at Wrestling News HQ, on the internet at WrestlingNewsSource.com, and on Facebook at Wrestling News. Keep the comments coming. We want to hear from you week to week. All this talk of old superstars and titles and pay-per-views leads very well into my final thoughts column for this week, which is about this Monday's 3-hour WWE Raw extravaganza, Old School, where superstars of the past are going to be brought in to interact and do a show with superstars of today. Once again, my Wrestling News Source colleague Justin Henry has published his thoughts on WWE Old School and how it's going to go and if it's a good idea at all. He feels that being reminded of WWE's past superstars that really had to get over without virtue of the internet wrestling community is going to sort of overshadow today's current superstars who are dealing more with scripted commentary and pre-produced segments as a result of I think as a direct result of the WWE's and professional wrestling's fan community becoming sort of smarter as the years have gone by. He thinks it's going to be depressing having to listen to potentially some great commentary by the likes of Jesse Ventura or Bobby Heenan or any of the old color commentators, then have to go back to listening to Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole after that. It's going to be hard to listen to a promo from a Dusty Rhodes type, who was some of the great mic workers of the past, and then have to come back to scripted comments where the wrestlers are just instructed to hit the bullet points rather than having to work off the cuff. Again, I'm going to disagree with Justin on this, and I think it's exactly what the WWE needs. The WWE needs to bring these guys back, not for the on-air portion of the show, which I'm sure is going to be entertaining and a great piece of nostalgia for a fan of 30 years like myself, but to get them interacting with these guys backstage and giving them advice and being mentors. Dusty Rhodes schooling some of the newer talent on how to cut a promo. Howard Finkel coming in and instructing some ring announcers on how to sound like a ring announcer. Let's have Arn Anderson and Jesse Ventura and those guys come in and talk to Jerry Lawler and talk to Michael Cole about being a better color commentator. Jerry's great, don't get me wrong, but he was better in the ring. And it's time for the current generation to learn how you had to do it when it wasn't so easy. As far as the talent itself is concerned, I don't think it's going to be the great display of talent that we're expecting when you hear something like WWE Old School. I mean, I know they announced already that Mae Young is going to be involved, and God knows that gets butts in seats. And we can expect our usual run from, say, a Sergeant Slaughter and Arn Anderson and folks that are currently working for the WWE in some capacity. But I think this event is going to be more punctuated by the superstars we know we're not going to see, like Hulk Hogan, who, yeah, we're all tired of him, but he is so entrenched in the WWE's past. To not see him on a show sort of celebrating the WWE's past is going to be odd. We heard this week that the Honky Tonk Man isn't going to be involved, and boy, is he upset about it, to the point where he's going to be releasing commentary on how that negotiation went and what helped it go south. So that'll be interesting to see. We know we're not going to see Ric Flair. We know that Macho Man Randy Savage wasn't even contacted. So these folks that were so deeply involved and deeply a part of the WWE's past, we're not going to see. So I think it's going to be a bit of a letdown. It's not going to be the event that a real wrestling nostalgist like myself would want to see and would be looking forward to. And I think it's going to be a parade of the usual suspects, the Sergeant Slaughters, the Dusty Rhodes, those guys that we've come to see on a periodic basis in the WWE, regardless. You know, some comedy bits with the Iron Sheik and Kamala, I'm sure, are going to come up. But it's going to be bittersweet. It's going to be nice to see the old faces, but I know it could be more. Well, by this time next week, WWE Old School will be Old School, and we want to hear from you about it. What'd you think of the event? Who did you miss? Who should have been there? Who didn't need to be there but was? Let's get your comments on that and on all the current events in the world of professional wrestling, and not just the WWE, but on TNA as well, in the indies. there was sort of a running theme in the YouTube comments and some of the emails that we got that said we should do more segments on the indie federations, like Ring of Honor and Combat Zone. Let's get your thoughts on those. What do you think of the indie federations? As always, you can leave your comments here on the YouTube screen, or you can find us on the internet at WrestlingNewsSource.com, on Twitter at WrestlingNewsHQ, and on Facebook at Wrestling News. Once again, my name's David for The Wrestling Source, the exclusive YouTube show of WrestlingNewsSource.com. See you next week.